Hello students, welcome to our next lecture that is on the maintenance and overhauling of the brakes. Now brake is an important part of our automobile or any vehicle, right? Without a brake you cannot stop a vehicle or you cannot control the vehicle speed, right? So brake is one of the most important component of the vehicle to prevent the accident. Right, it is also considered as a component of active safety of the vehicle. Right, so let's see how to maintain the brakes conditions so that it doesn't fail. First, let's understand the components of the drum brakes. Right, the drum brake is generally attached in the rear side of the vehicle. The drum brake has a back plate assembly, the brake drum, and the wheel nuts which is attached to the wheel and the brake drum. This brake drum assembly, in that the back plate assembly and the drum brake has the main components. The first you can see on the screen is the drum of the brake, in which the shoes will come in contact whenever we apply the brakes, and because of the friction the braking effect will be obtained. In the back plate, first you can see right now is that shoes is attached to the back plate. These shoes are called as the brake shoes. In between the brake shoes, the given component is known as the wheel cylinder. The wheel cylinder supplies our power to the shoes, and when we apply the brakes, the shoes expands in the outward direction, and after expanding it will come in the contact with our brake drum. There are two springs has been provided on the brake drum. One spring in between the brake shoes, that is known as the return spring, which is required whenever we are retracting the brake so that the brake comes in the contact. The next thing you are seeing is the self-adjusting mechanism. Right, this adjusting mechanism is provided in the shoe brake. With the friction, the shoes will wear. With the wear, the shoes will require the adjustment, and that self-adjusting mechanism provides you the adjustment. Last thing you are seeing is the arrangement to operate it as a parking brake. The parking brake is generally connected in the rear side of the shoes brake, and this is mostly a mechanical linkages. So with the help of this mechanical linkages, when we operate our hand brake lever, we can operate the brake drums that is connected in the rear side of the vehicle. Let's see the components of the disc brake. The disc brake is look like you are seeing on the screen. The disc brake has one disc that is connected to our wheel system, on which our caliper assembly has been arranged. The caliper assembly is mostly operated by the help of the hydraulic force. You can see the exploded view of the disc brake, in which almost all the components of the caliper assembly can be seen. The first one is the mounting bracket, which is used to mount our caliper assembly. Next is the caliper, the strut wings, the locking bolts, the dust tool for the sealing, and the brake mounting clip, which is used to mount. And the most important part, the brake pads. The brake pads comes into contact with our disc. The brake piston operates our brake pads whenever we apply the brake force on our brake lever. After applying the brake force, the hydraulic force will be transferred into the piston, and piston will operate like you can see in this graphics behind me. After the operating of the piston, you can see the caliper can move in the left and right direction, or you can say in the horizontal direction. With that movement, our brake pads can be moved in the inward direction so that it comes into contact with the disc. You can see right now how the brakes is applied in the disc brake. The disc brake is applied when we push the brake force on our pedal, so that our brake piston will force our pads to push our disc in the inward direction. This is how you can see the brake operating from the top, in which one caliper will be fixed, one will be moving caliper. This is how the caliper assembly will work. One piston will move the brake pad in one direction, the fixed piston will stay its position, caliper assembly will move, and so that both of the brake pads will come in contact with our brake disc. Next thing is the diagnosis of the drum brakes. How to diagnose the drum brakes and how to troubleshoot those problems. First thing is the pedal goes to the floor, which means that whenever we apply the brake, the pedal goes directly to the floor. Generally, if we apply the brake, it is skirting over, not too much movement of the brake pedal will be obtained. But if this is happening, then there is a problem in the hydraulic system of the brakes. Next thing is the brake drag, which means whenever I try to apply the brakes, it is dragging or the brake is not getting properly applied. Then it can be problem in the brake pads or the brake shoes depending on the type of brake. If the vehicle is pulling to the one side when braking, right, that can be happen if the brake force is not properly distributed in all the four wheels. For that system we use EBD nowadays, which distributes our brake force according to the requirement of all the wheels. Next thing is the pedal is getting softer. Right, whenever I try to push the pedal, it is soft and the force is not getting transferred to our brake shoes. That can happen if the air is come in the hydraulic system of the brakes or if the master cylinder has failed. Right, so this can be the reason for the brakes being softer than the normal. Next thing is that the poor braking is getting whenever we are trying to excessive brake pedal. Right, whenever we try to put the excessive force on the brake pedal, that is only required when the brake condition is getting poor, which means if the shoes has weared out so that the clearance between the drum and shoes is increased, for that the brake shoe adjustment can be obtained, or if there is air in the hydraulic system, then also this problem can arise. Next thing is brake is noisy. Noisy brakes can be happen if the lining material on the shoes is wet. Because of that, the metal to metal contact will happen between the drum and our shoes, and that will create the noise whenever we apply the brake. And the last thing is the loss of the brake fluid. If the brake fluid is lost from the system, then proper force will not be transferred to our brakes. Suppose we are forcing our pedal with the full force for the brake to be applied, but because of the loss of fluid or lesser amount of fluid in the system, 100% power is not transferred to our brake. Next thing is diagnosis of the disc brakes. The disc brakes can have almost similar problems, same as the problems that we discussed in the case of the drum brakes. But in the case of the disc brake, if there is a problem of the excessive pedal travel, then that can happen if the clearance between the brake pad is increased, or if the hydraulic system has faults in it, or the bleeding is required in the hydraulic system whenever there is air is entrapped in the master cylinder. If the pedal is pulsating, right, which means whenever we try to apply the brake, the pedal pulsates or it vibrates, that can be felt by a driver. That pedal pulsations can be happening because if there is not proper balancing in the parts of the components of the braking system of disc brake, or if the one of the brake pads has been faulty, this can create the pulsations or the vibrations in the braking system or on the brake pedal. Next thing is excessive brake pedal force is required to apply the brakes. That can happen because if the air is entrapped in the hydraulic system, so the bleeding will be required, or if the brake pads has been weared, so in that case, after a very long time, the brake pads needs to be replaced. Next problems can be if the vehicle pulls to one side while we are braking. There can also be reasons of the steering geometry as well if the vehicle is pulling towards one side, or if the braking is getting stick to our disc, then also this can happen if the vehicle is pulling towards the one side whenever we are applying the brake. The last thing is the noise in the brake. Right, again the noise only will happen if the lining materials on the brake pads or even the brake pads has wore out. If the surface contact between the brake disc and pads is not proper, then also it can create the brake noise. So these are the common problems that can arise in the case of the drum brakes and the disc brakes. Now, how to do the service in the case of the drum brakes? The drum brakes will require the service at regular intervals. Also, the disc brake does not require as similar services as the drum brakes. The drum brakes require more attention compared to our disc brake service. For the drum brakes, the brake fluid will be added whenever required in the hydraulic system. Now this system or this service type is same for the drum and disc brake, because brake fluid works in the hydraulic brake system circuit. Now the circuit for the disc and drum brake will be similar. So whenever we require or whenever the fluid is lesser in the system, the brake fluid will be added in the system. Second thing will be to adjust the brake shoes. Now the adjustment of brake shoes is arises more frequently in case of the drum brakes compared to the disc brakes. The adjustment of the shoes will be required whenever we apply the brakes. The shoes will wear out because of the friction. To generate this friction, the clearance will be created with time. Whenever we apply too much of the brake, the wear will be more, the clearance will be increased. So to apply the brakes next time, we have to apply an extra effort. So to get the better performance of the drum brakes, the shoes needs to be adjusted time to time. That adjustment will be done whenever we are doing the service of the vehicle. The braking effect will be checked, and if the shoes requires adjustment, then the adjustment will be done by the service engineer. Next thing is the flushing of the hydraulic system. If there is an air in the system of the hydraulic brakes, then first thing will be to flush the brake fluid from the braking system. After flushing the brake fluid, the bleeding will be done in the braking system. That bleeding will stop the air coming in the system and proper pressure will be generated in the system. Bleeding will be required in the braking system whenever the air is entrapped in the master cylinder or the braking system. Air reduces our pressure. Air is a compressible property and it will compress itself and it will not transfer our pressure that is being applied on the brake pedal. And that brake pedal force will not be 100% transmitted to the brake. So that air needs to be removed from the braking system, and that can be removed by the help of the bleeding process. Next thing is the repair and replacing of the master cylinder. If there is problem in the master cylinder, then it can be replaced or it can be repaired by the required procedure. And last thing is the replacement of the brake linings. The linings on the brake shoes will have to be replaced time to time. In case of the disc brake, the replacement of the brake pads itself will be done. But in case of the shoe brakes, the linings of the brake shoes will be replaced time to time if the adjustment of the brake shoes is not possible. Last thing is the refinishing of the drums. The drums will also wear with the brake shoes. So with time to time, the surface of the drum will get uneven. To get the proper even surface on the drum, the refinishing work on the drums of the drum brakes will be done. Repairing of the power brake unit. Now the power brake unit is common for the drum brakes and disc brakes as well. Power brake unit is also known as the vacuum booster. If the vacuum booster is not working, then our force on the brake pedal will increase. So to reduce that brake force, what we will require is to repair the vacuum booster in the vehicle. Next thing is the service of the disc brake. There are many common factors in the drum and disc brake. Rather than that, the requirement of the disc brake will be for the caliper service. The caliper assembly that is attached on the system of the disc, that assembly will require the service after some longer interval compared to the drum brakes. And second thing will be to service the brake disc. Right, so the brake disc or the brake pads on the disc will be checked whenever the braking is compromised or the 100% effort is not not getting obtained in the case of the disc brakes. So these two are the different service procedures that is required for the disc brakes itself. So in this lecture we saw about the drum brakes, disc brakes, and the problems that can commonly arise in the both of the brakes, and the service procedures that are required in the disc and drum brakes. In the next lecture we will see some of the service procedures that is important in our braking service in the detail. Until then, thank you so much.